The aroma of freshly baked pizza had always been Michael Carter's favorite scent in the world. For 15 years, it had greeted him every morning as he unlocked the doors of Carter's classic pizza, reminding him of the dream he had built from scratch. But today, that familiar smell turned his stomach into knots as he stood across the street from his restaurant, dressed in clothes he had borrowed from his teenage son. "You've got this, Mike," he whispered to himself, adjusting the baseball cap that felt foreign on his head. The vintage Red Sox cap, worn and faded, had been a strategic choice. His employees knew he was a die-hard Yankees fan. His usual crisp button-downs and dress pants had been replaced with baggy jeans and an oversized hoodie that made him look like just another middle-aged man trying too hard to look young. The morning rush had just ended, and through the large windows, he could see his staff moving around with a casualness that made his jaw clench. Something was very wrong with his restaurant, and it wasn't just the numbers telling him so. The spreadsheets on his desk at home told a clear story. In the past 3 months, their revenue had dropped by 40%. But it was the little things that really kept him up at night. Mrs. Romano, who had been coming in every Tuesday for 14 years to get her vegetarian supreme pizza, hadn't shown up in weeks. The Martinez family, who celebrated every birthday and graduation at his restaurant, had canceled their standing reservation last month. Even the high school basketball team, who had made Carter's their post-game tradition, now ordered from Pizza Hut instead. Michael pulled out his phone and opened his restaurant's review page. The latest one-star review glared at him. "Found a hair in my pizza. Manager didn't even care. Never coming back." He knew for a fact that all his kitchen staff wore hairnets. It was a rule he had enforced religiously since day one. A young couple emerged from his restaurant, their faces pinched with disappointment. The girl was saying something about the pizza being cold in the middle. Michael's heart sank further. His grandfather's recipe had been perfected over 3 generations. A cold center simply didn't happen in a Carter's pizza. Taking a deep breath, he crossed the street. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and he had to resist the urge to immediately inspect the slight squeak in its ring, something he would normally have fixed immediately. Instead, he shuffled to the counter, keeping his head down like any ordinary customer. "Welcome to Carter's," Tom, the newer cashier, mumbled without looking up from his phone. Michael had hired him 2 months ago, and something about the kid had always felt off, but his references had checked out. "Yeah, can I get a slice of pepperoni and a Coke?" Michael pitched his voice higher than usual, adding a slight tremor to it. "That'll be $7.50, Tom replied, finally glancing up with the kind of bored expression that made Michael want to launch into his customer service speech right then and there. As Michael paid, he noticed something odd. Tom didn't enter the order into the POS system, the one Michael had spent thousands upgrading just last year. Instead, he scribbled something on a notepad and called out to the kitchen, "1 pep slice." Michael took his receipt and frowned. The paper was different, cheaper, thinner than the thermal paper they usually used. He pocketed it carefully, making a mental note. Finding a seat near the counter, Michael settled in to observe. The lunch rush would start soon, and he wanted to see how his staff handled it. His slice arrived lukewarm, the cheese congealed in a way that made him wince. This wasn't how his pizzas were supposed to be served. A group of construction workers came in, regulars who usually ordered the meat lovers special. Michael watched as Lisa, his other cashier, took their order. Again, no POS system. She wrote something in what looked like a separate notepad from Tom's. "The quality's gone downhill," one of the construction workers muttered to his colleague. "Remember how good it used to be?" Michael's fingers tightened around his pizza slice. He had inherited his grandfather's recipe book, filled with margin notes and secret techniques passed down through generations. Every morning, he still made the sauce himself, following those handwritten instructions to the letter. His dough was proofed for exactly 72 hours. His cheese blend was custom ordered from a small dairy in Wisconsin. What was happening to his restaurant? The lunch rush began in earnest, and Michael noticed something else strange. Whenever a customer complained, and there were many, Tom and Lisa exchanged quick glances. Their responses seemed rehearsed, almost practiced. "We'll let the owner know," they'd say, "or management is aware of the issues." Then came the moment that made his blood run cold. A young mother approached the counter, her face flushed with anger. "This is the 3rd time this week my delivery order has been wrong," she said, placing a pizza box on the counter. "I ordered a plain cheese pizza for my kid's birthday party. This is covered in jalapenos and hot sauce. Lisa's response was almost too smooth. I'm so sorry, ma'am. Our delivery system has been having issues lately. Would you like a refund? I want to speak to the owner, the woman demanded. Mr. Carter is away on business, Tom cut in quickly. He's been dealing with some personal issues. Michael felt his chest tighten. He hadn't been away. He'd been in his office every day, going over the books, trying to figure out what was wrong. How many other customers had been told he was away? As the woman left with her refund, Michael heard something that made him freeze mid-bite. Lisa leaned over to Tom, her voice dropped to a whisper, but in the momentary lull between customers, her words carried clearly to Michael's corner. It's almost too easy, she chuckled. He still thinks people just don't like his pizza anymore. Michael's heart stopped. He reached slowly for his phone, his fingers trembling as he opened the voice recorder app. Something was very, very wrong at Carter's Classic Pizza, and it wasn't just bad service or cold food. He had walked in looking for answers about his failing business. Instead, he had stumbled onto what seemed like a conspiracy, and somehow, he knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. Michael's hands shook as he positioned his phone carefully on the table, its microphone pointed toward the counter. He took another bite of his now cold pizza, forcing himself to appear casual while his mind raced. The conversation between Tom and Lisa continued, their voices low but clear in the post-lunch lull. Did you see his face when he checked the numbers last week? Lisa snickered, restocking napkins with deliberate slowness. Looked like he was going to cry. Michael remembered that moment. He had been in his office, staring at the monthly reports, trying to understand how they had lost 3 major catering contracts in a single week. He thought he had been alone, but apparently they had been watching him, studying his reactions like vultures circling their prey. The best part, Tom leaned closer to Lisa, his voice dropping even lower, he's still using his grandfather's special recipe, measuring everything to the gram like it matters. Meanwhile, he patted his pocket where Michael had noticed a small vial earlier. The sauce modifier? Lisa asked, raising an eyebrow. Just a few drops make any pizza taste like cardboard. Completely safe, just kills the flavor. Dylan's chemist friend is a genius. The name hit Michael like a physical blow. Dylan. The memories flooded back, a tall, lanky young man with intense eyes and a chip on his shoulder. Michael had hired him 8 months ago as a shift manager, impressed by his business degree and seemingly endless enthusiasm for the restaurant industry. Then the register shortages started, small at first. 20. H-E-R-E. 20 here, 50 there. Michael had installed new security cameras, hoping to catch a clerical error. Instead, he caught Dylan pocketing cash after hours. The confrontation had been ugly. Dylan had screamed about his student loans, about how people like Michael had everything handed to them, about how he regretted firing him. Michael had written it off as the angry words of a desperate young man. Now those threats took on a whole new meaning. Speaking of Dylan, Lisa continued, he wants us to step it up. Carter's too stubborn. Not selling fast enough. Time for phase 2. Tom grinned, and something in his expression made Michael's skin crawl. Already on it. Got a friend at the health department who's willing to find some violations next week. Major ones. Isn't that risky? Nah, Dylan's got it covered. The inspector's got gambling debts, and Dylan's got photos. Besides, once Carter sells, the new owners will make all the violations disappear like magic. Michael felt sick. He had always run a clean kitchen. His grandfather had drilled food safety into him, since he was tall enough to reach the counter. The thought of someone deliberately sabotaging that made his blood boil. The bell above the door chimed, and Michael glanced up to see a familiar face that nearly made him blow his cover. Sarah Chin, his head chef for the past decade, walked in wearing her street clothes. She wasn't scheduled to work today. Hey guys, Sarah said, her usually cheerful voice subdued. Is Carter in? Nah, he's hiding in his office as usual, Tom replied. Probably crying over the books again. Sarah's face tightened almost imperceptibly. She had been acting strange lately, distant. Michael had attributed it to stress from the business downturn, but now he wondered if there was more to it. I need to check something in the kitchen, Sarah said, heading toward the swinging doors. Wait, Lisa called out too quickly. Health inspector coming soon. Better not have any unauthorized personnel back there. Sarah paused, her hand on the door. Since when do you care about health regulations? The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Michael watched as Tom's hand moved to his pocket, the one with the vial, and Sarah's eyes followed the movement. "You know what?" Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. "Never mind. I'll come back later." As she turned to leave, Michael caught a glimpse of something in her hand, a small camera. She pushed through the front door quickly, and through the window, he saw her pull out her phone and make a call. "Think she suspects?" Tom asked, watching Sarah's retreating figure. Lisa shrugged. "Doesn't matter. By next week, this place will be drowning in health code violations. After that, Carter will be lucky if he can sell this place for enough to cover his loans." "Dylan's buyer is ready?" Tom asked. "Yes. Some chain restaurant developer. They're going to tear the place down, build a franchise. Dylan gets a finder's fee, we get our bonuses, and Carter gets to watch his precious family legacy turned into another cookie-cutter burger joint." Michael's grip on his pizza slice had turned it into dough again. The recipe book in his office, the one his grandfather had passed down, contained more than just pizza recipes. It held memories, his father teaching him how to knead dough, his grandfather showing him how to test the sauce by smell, the day they had opened the restaurant together. The thought of it all being destroyed made something shift inside him. He had walked in here planning to investigate poor service. Instead, he had uncovered a conspiracy that went beyond simple revenge. This was a coordinated attack on everything he had spent his life building. But they had made a mistake. They had assumed his silence meant weakness. They thought his dedication to tradition meant he couldn't adapt. They had underestimated what a man would do to protect his family's legacy. As Tom and Lisa continued their conversation, unaware of their boss sitting nearby, Michael started forming a plan. Sarah's behavior suggested he might have an ally he hadn't expected. And if Dylan thought he was the only one who could play the long game, he was about to learn otherwise. Michael reached for his phone, stopping the recording. He had evidence now, but he needed more. And as he listened to his employees plot the destruction of his life's work, a new emotion began to override his shock and anger: determination. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Michael waited until Tom and Lisa were busy with the afternoon prep before slipping out of the restaurant. His mind was racing with everything he had learned, but he knew he couldn't act rashly. As he walked to his car, parked around the corner, a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "Nice hat. Yankees fan like you must have hated wearing it." Sarah Chin stepped out from behind a delivery van, her arms crossed. Michael's heart jumped to his throat, but her slight smile told him she wasn't there to expose him. "How long have you known?" he asked, removing the Red Sox cap. "Since you walked in. You have a distinctive limp from that high school baseball injury. But more importantly," she pulled out her phone, "I've been gathering evidence for weeks." Michael stared at his head chef of 10 years. "You knew about Dylan's plan?" "Not everything, but I knew something was wrong when the suppliers started changing without authorization. Premium ingredients replaced with cheap substitutes. Delivery orders mysteriously getting mixed up." She showed him photos on her phone, screenshots of text messages, pictures of tampered invoices, even a video of Tom adding something to the sauce when he thought no one was watching. "Why didn't you come to me?" Michael asked, trying to keep the hurt from his voice. Sarah's expression darkened. "Because at first, I thought you were in on it." "What?" "Think about it, Michael. The restaurant's insurance policy was updated 3 months ago. The property value assessment was redone. It looked like you were preparing to sell, maybe even orchestrating the decline yourself for the insurance payout." Michael felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The insurance update had been routine, his annual review with his financial advisor. The property assessment had been for a loan he had hoped would help them through the rough patch. But from the outside, he could see how it looked suspicious. "What changed your mind?" Sarah pulled up a text message chain. "Dylan got sloppy. Started bragging to his friends about his foolproof plan to destroy Carter's. I was at the bar last week when he got drunk and let some details slip. That's when I realized you were the target, not the mastermind." They moved to Sarah's car, where they could talk privately. What she revealed next made Michael's blood run cold. "Dylan's not working alone," Sarah explained, pulling out a folder. "He's just a pawn in a bigger game. Look at this." She handed Michael a stack of papers: property records, zoning applications, development plans. "Riverside Development Corporation," Michael read the letterhead. "They've been buying up properties all along the street. Your restaurant is the last holdout in their plan for a new shopping complex." They tried to buy you out legitimately 6 months ago through that real estate agent. Michael remembered. I told them the restaurant wasn't for sale at any price. Exactly. That's when they hired Dylan. He'd been bragging about getting fired, about knowing the restaurant's weaknesses. They offered him a chance at revenge plus a percentage of the development deal. Michael flipped through the papers, his hands shaking. Property assessments, environmental surveys, construction permits, all dated months before Dylan's firing. This wasn't just revenge. It was corporate sabotage. But here's what Dylan doesn't know, Sarah continued, a grim smile on her face. Once the sale goes through, Riverside plans to frame him for everything. They've got a paper trail showing him acting alone, threatening their employees, even blackmailing the health inspector independently. He thinks he's getting a big payout, but he's actually setting himself up to take the fall. How did you get all this? Sarah hesitated. Remember my brother? The one who works in corporate law. He recognized Riverside's tactics from another case. They've done this before, finding disgruntled ex-employees to do their dirty work, then disposing of them. Michael's mind was spinning. All this time, he thought he was dealing with a simple case of revenge. Instead, he had stumbled into a corporate takeover scheme that made Dylan's plot look amateur by comparison. There's more, Sarah said, her voice dropping. The health inspector visit next week. It's not just about violations. They're going to find evidence of money laundering. They've been setting up a paper trail, making it look like you've been running a criminal enterprise. The business downer would just be the perfect cover for why you'd suddenly sell. That's why they changed the receipt paper, Michael realized. Exactly. Tom and Lisa think they're just helping with a revenge scheme. They don't realize they're actually participating in a criminal conspiracy that could land everyone in federal prison. Michael leaned back, closing his eyes. His grandfather had started this restaurant with nothing but a recipe book and a dream. His father had expanded it, turning it into a neighborhood institution. Now, not only was he about to lose it all, but his family's legacy would be tarnished with accusations of criminality. Unless, Sarah said slowly, you said Dylan doesn't know about Riverside's plan to betray him? No, he's completely in the dark. Why? A plan was forming in Michael's mind. Because that's our way in. Dylan thinks he's the mastermind. Riverside thinks they're controlling everything from the shadows. And Tom and Lisa think they're just helping with some harmless sabotage. Everyone's operating on different levels of information. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to let them all know exactly who they're dealing with. Michael pulled out his phone. But first, I need to make a call to an old friend at the FBI's white-collar crime division. And then, he smiled for the first time that day, I'm going to need your help with a special recipe. Sarah raised an eyebrow. The kind that involves your grandfather's secret sauce? Or the kind that involves serving someone their just desserts? Both, Michael said, his smile turning grim. Definitely both. The next 3 days were the hardest of Michael's life. Every morning, he drove to Carter's Classic Pizza as usual, disappearing into his office while Sarah kept an eye on Tom and Lisa. But now, his office had become a command center for an elaborate counter-operation. Your friend at the FBI came through, Sarah whispered during a brief meeting in his office, sliding a small device across his desk. It's a high-quality recording device, better than your phone. Michael picked up what looked like an ordinary pen. And they're really interested in Riverside development? Very. Turns out your case connects to 3 other similar situations in different states. They've been building a RICO case against Riverside for months. A knock at the office door made them both jump. It was Tom, holding a stack of delivery receipts. Mr. Carter, these need your signature. Michael noticed how Tom's eyes darted around the office, likely looking for signs of financial distress or preparation for selling. He signed the receipts with deliberate slowness, using his new recording pen. Everything okay, Tom? Michael asked casually. You seem nervous. No, sir. Everything's fine. Tom's hand went to his pocket, the one where he kept the flavor-killing vial, a tell Michael now watched for carefully. After Tom left, Sarah shook her head. He's getting suspicious. Yesterday, he asked me why you weren't more upset about the latest health code violation threat. Perfect, Michael smiled. That means it's time for phase 1. Make the call. Sarah pulled out her phone and dialed the number. Hi, Dylan. It's Sarah Chin from Carter's. Listen, I've been thinking about what you said at the bar. Can we meet? There's something you should know about Riverside development. The meeting was set for that evening at a bar 3 towns over. Meanwhile, Michael had another appointment to keep. He straightened his tie and headed to a very different kind of establishment, the regional offices of Riverside Development Corporation. Mr. Carter, Gerald Walsh, Riverside's regional director, stood to greet him with practiced corporate warmth. What a pleasant surprise. Is it? Michael kept his voice neutral as he sat down. I would think you've been expecting me. Walsh's smile didn't waver. Oh, my restaurant's been having some troubles lately. Health code issues, bad reviews, mysterious problems with suppliers. Michael leaned forward. The kind of troubles that might make a man consider selling. The restaurant business can be challenging, Walsh offered smoothly. Actually, Michael cut him off. I'm not here to sell. I'm here to make you an offer. That got Walsh's attention. His smile flickered just slightly. I have some interesting documents, Michael continued. Records of payments to a certain disgruntled ex-employee, evidence of corporate espionage, proof of attempted fraud. The FBI finds it all very interesting. Walsh's smile vanished entirely. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Carter. One that could result in a defamation lawsuit. Check your phone, Michael said right on cue. Walsh's cell phone buzzed. He looked at it, and Michael watched with satisfaction as the color drained from his face. Sarah had just sent Dylan the proof of Riverside's plan to frame him, and Dylan, as they had hoped, was already forwarding it to everyone he knew, including his contacts at Riverside. Disgruntled employees can be so unpredictable, can't they? Michael stood up. Especially when they find out they've been played for fools. I'll let you deal with the fallout. Oh, and Mr. Walsh? My restaurant isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. As Michael walked out of Riverside's offices, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dylan went ballistic. He's threatening to go to the media about everything. Your FBI friends are moving in. Phase 1 was complete. Dylan's rage at being betrayed would ensure he exposed every detail of Riverside's operation, not realizing he was incriminating himself in the process. But Michael wasn't done yet. He drove back to Carter's, arriving just before the dinner rush. Tom and Lisa were at the counter, looking anxious. They surely had heard from Dylan by now about the imploding scheme. Tom, Lisa, Michael called out. Could you join me in my office? They followed him, exchanging nervous glances. Michael sat behind his desk, noting how Tom's hand kept straying to his pocket with the flavor-killing vial. Interesting substance you've got there, Tom, Michael said casually. The FBI lab found it fascinating, completely untraceable under normal circumstances, but their mass spectrometers are anything but normal. Tom's face went white. Lisa started to stand, but Michael's next words froze her in place. Sit down, both of you. You're about to learn the difference between being conspirators and being witnesses. He laid out their options with brutal clarity. They could either cooperate fully, telling the FBI everything they knew about Dylan and Riverside's operation, or they could face charges as willing participants in corporate espionage and food tampering. But you don't understand, Lisa protested weakly. We didn't know about any corporate stuff. Dylan just said we were helping him get revenge. By deliberately destroying a business that feeds 50 families through its employees' paychecks. Michael's voice was like ice. Tell me, what's the going rate for betrayal these days? Before they could respond, Sarah burst into the office. Michael, you need to see this. She turned on the small TV mounted in the corner, switching to the local news. Dylan's face filled the screen as he ranted to reporters outside Riverside's offices, waving documents and making wild accusations. In the background, FBI agents could be seen entering the building. Looks like your friend decided to go public after all, Michael told his shocked employees. So what's it going to be? Witnesses or defendants? Tom reached into his pocket, pulled out the vial, and placed it on Michael's desk with trembling hands. We'll tell you everything. Good choice, Michael said, picking up his recording pen. Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out. As Tom and Lisa began their confession, Michael caught Sarah's eye and nodded slightly. Phase 2 was unfolding perfectly. But the real test would come tomorrow, when he implemented the final part of his plan, one that would either save his restaurant or destroy it completely. The morning after Dylan's public meltdown, Carter's Classic Pizza was surrounded by news vans. Michael watched them from his office window, remembering his father's words. Son, in business, timing is everything. He had never appreciated that wisdom more than now. They're all here, Sarah reported, closing the office door behind her. Channel 4, Channel 7, even that food blogger who gave us the first bad review 3 months ago. They're requesting interviews. Let them wait, Michael replied, reviewing the documents spread across his desk. Tom and Lisa's signed confessions, Dylan's text messages, financial records showing Riverside's pattern of property manipulation. But the most important paper was one that only he and Sarah knew about yet. Are you sure about this? Sarah asked, eyeing the document. It's risky. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense, Michael answered, reaching for his grandfather's recipe book. Is everything ready in the kitchen? Just like you asked, though I still don't understand. A commotion outside interrupted her. Through the office window, they saw Dylan trying to push past the reporters, his face red with rage. 2 FBI agents followed close behind but weren't intervening, exactly as planned. Right on time, Michael smiled. Let's give him what he came for. Dylan burst into the restaurant, the bell's cheerful chime contrasting sharply with his dramatic entrance. Carter, he shouted. You set me up. The lunch crowd turned to stare. Smartphones appeared, recording the scene. Michael stepped calmly from his office, aware that every move he made would likely end up on social media within minutes. Dylan, he said evenly. I was hoping you'd stop by. You think you're so clever, Dylan spat. Getting me to expose Riverside, making me look like their puppet. I'll tell everyone what really happened. You mean how you stole from the register? Michael's voice carried clearly through the now silent restaurant. Or how you paid people to leave fake reviews. Maybe about the chemical you had Tom add to the food? Dylan's face shifted from rage to uncertainty. Behind him, the FBI agents moved closer, but Michael raised a hand to stop them. This confrontation needed to play out perfectly. You don't have proof of any of that, Dylan said, but his voice wavered. Michael pulled out his phone. Actually, I do. Want to hear yourself plotting with Tom and Lisa? Or should we discuss the text you sent about bribing the health inspector? He looked past Dylan to the growing crowd of reporters pressing against the windows. I'm sure the media would love to hear it all. You're bluffing, Dylan snarled, but he took a step back. Am I? Michael turned to the customers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. To make it up to you, today's meals are on the house. And you're about to witness something special. I'm going to make every pizza myself, using my grandfather's original recipe, the real recipe, without any of Dylan's modifications. The customers murmured with interest. The food blogger pushed her way inside, camera ready. Sarah, Michael called. Would you bring me my grandfather's book? Sarah emerged from the office, carrying the worn recipe book. But as she handed it to Michael, Dylan lunged forward. That book is worth nothing, he shouted. Your precious family recipes? I copied them all months ago. I'll open my own place, do it better than you ever could. Michael opened the book calmly. You copied these recipes? Are you sure about that? Something in his tone made Dylan pause. The real recipes, Michael continued, are written in Armenian, my grandfather's native language. What you copied was the English version, the fake one I created the day after I caught you stealing. The color drained from Dylan's face. What? I knew you'd try something after I fired you. So I prepared. Every recipe you stole, every technique you copied, they're all slightly wrong. Just enough to ensure the food never tastes quite right. The food blogger gasped audibly. Several customers were filming now. That's impossible, Dylan whispered. Is it? Did you ever wonder why your new business plan wasn't attracting any investors? Why Riverside had to promise you so much money to help destroy my restaurant instead of just letting you compete with it? Michael stepped closer. Because they tested your recipe and knew they'd never work. Dylan's legs seemed to give out. He sank into a nearby chair, the fight draining from him as the full implications hit him. The real recipes never left this book, Michael said, patting the worn cover. And now, I'm going to show everyone exactly what they've been missing. For the next 2 hours, Michael worked in the open kitchen, narrating each step as he made pizza after pizza. The customers watched in amazement as he mixed his grandfather's authentic sauce, prepared the special dough, and created the perfect blend of toppings. The food blogger's live stream attracted thousands of viewers. But while Michael cooked, Sarah was implementing the final phase of their plan. In the office, she was scanning and uploading documents, sending emails, and making calls. The evidence of Riverside's conspiracy wasn't just going to the FBI. It was going to their shareholders, their board of directors, and their competitors. By the end of the day, Riverside Development Corporation's stock had dropped 15%. Their board called an emergency meeting. 3 executives resigned, and Carter's Classic Pizza had a line around the block. They'll try to bury this, Sarah warned as they finally closed up that night. Riverside has powerful lawyers. They can try, Michael said, holding up the document they'd prepared. But tomorrow morning, I'm filing a RICO lawsuit against them, not just for the attempted takeover, but for every business they've destroyed in the past 5 years. And guess who's agreed to testify? Sarah's eyes widened as she looked at the signature at the bottom of the document. Is that Riverside's former CFO? Yes. Turns out he's been looking for a way to come clean for months. Dylan's public meltdown gave him the perfect opportunity. Michael looked around his restaurant, his grandfather's dream, his father's legacy, his life's work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now he had won, not just survived, but triumphed. There's just one thing I don't understand, Sarah said. Why go through all this drama today? You already had enough evidence to destroy them. Michael smiled, picking up his grandfather's recipe book. Because sometimes, Sarah, the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served hot, fresh, and with a side of justice. Outside, the last of the news vans were pulling away. But Michael knew this story was far from over. Phase 3 would begin tomorrow, and with it, the real revolution in the restaurant industry would begin. 1 month after Dylan's public meltdown, Michael stood in front of Carter's Classic Pizza, watching the morning sun reflect off the newly polished windows. The line of customers already wrapped around the block, just as it had every day since the truth came out. But today was different. Today was about more than just pizza. Ready for this? Sarah asked, joining him at the entrance. She held up a tablet showing the morning's headlines. Riverside Development executives indicted, massive corporate conspiracy uncovered, and local pizzeria owner turns tables on corporate raiders. Almost, Michael replied, pulling his grandfather's recipe book from his messenger bag. Just need to do one thing first. Inside, the restaurant hummed with activity. The staff, all new except for Sarah, prepared for the day ahead. The kitchen gleamed with new equipment, paid for by the first installment of the settlement from Riverside Development. But the most significant changes weren't visible to the casual observer. Michael gathered everyone in the main dining room. Before we open today, there's something you all need to know. He held up the recipe book. This isn't just a collection of pizza recipes. It's a symbol of everything we stand for: tradition, quality, and integrity. He opened the book, revealing pages of handwritten Armenian text. My grandfather wrote these recipes after escaping to America with nothing but his skills and dreams. He believed that food wasn't just sustenance, it was a way to build community, to bring people together. The staff listened intently as Michael continued. What happened to our restaurant, the sabotage, the corporate takeover attempt, it wasn't just about money. It was about the soul of our community. Today, we're not just reopening Carter's Classic Pizza. We're launching something bigger. Sarah stepped forward, distributing folders to each employee. We're calling it the Community Restaurant Protection Initiative, she explained. Thanks to the settlement money and the evidence we gathered, we've created a legal fund and support network for other family-owned restaurants facing corporate bullying. Michael nodded. Every one of you has been carefully chosen, not just for your skills, but for your commitment to protecting what makes local restaurants special. From now on, 10% of our profits will go to helping other establishments fight back against predatory tactics. The bell above the door chimed, and everyone turned to see an elderly couple enter. Mrs. Romano, their longtime Tuesday regular who had disappeared during the sabotage, stood there with tears in her eyes. We saw the news, she said, clutching her husband's arm, about what they did to your grandfather's recipes. We just wanted you to know, no chain restaurant could ever replace what this place means to us. Michael walked over and hugged them both. Your table's waiting, Mrs. Romano, and wait until you taste what we're serving today. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Every pizza that left the kitchen was perfect, made with the true recipes, served with pride. The food blogger who had once given them a scathing review sat in the corner, documenting everything with tears of joy streaming down her face as she tasted the authentic flavors. Around noon, a special delivery arrived. Michael gathered everyone around as Sarah wheeled in a large digital display. On the screen, a live video conference connected them with dozens of other restaurant owners across the country, all victims of similar corporate takeover attempts. Thanks to what we learned from the Riverside case, Michael announced to the virtual gathering, we've identified their entire network. The shell companies, the fake review farms, the supplier manipulation tactics, everything. The FBI has already launched investigations in 12 cities. One of the restaurant owners, a woman from Chicago, spoke up. They tried to force me out last year. I lost everything. Not everything, Michael replied. We're filing a class action lawsuit with the evidence we've gathered, including testimony from Riverside's former CFO. We're not just going to win, we're going to change how these corporations operate. The meeting continued, stories of loss and resilience flowing between people who had never met but shared a common struggle. By the end, a new network had formed, one dedicated to protecting the heart and soul of local dining. As the afternoon wound down, Michael found himself back in his office, looking at the walls now covered with family photos. His grandfather in front of the original pizza oven, his father teaching him how to toss dough, and a new addition, a picture of the current staff, taken that morning. Sarah knocked and entered with a final piece of news. Just got word from the FBI. Dylan took a plea deal. He's testifying against everyone involved in the scheme. And Tom and Lisa? Community service and mandatory business ethics training. Their testimony helped break the case wide open. She paused. There's something else. Remember that chain restaurant developer who was going to buy us out? What about them? They're being investigated for similar schemes in 3 other states. Turns out Riverside wasn't the only corporation playing this game. Michael nodded, running his hand over his grandfather's recipe book. You know what the irony is? They thought targeting family restaurants made us weak. They never understood that our connections to our communities, our dedication to tradition, these aren't weaknesses. They're strengths. The sun was setting as Michael finally prepared to close for the day. The last customer had left, the kitchen was spotless, and a new batch of dough was proofing for tomorrow. As he counted the day's receipts, real ones, on the proper paper, he smiled at how different things were from just a month ago. The bell chimed one last time. Michael looked up to see his teenage son walking in, still wearing his baseball uniform. "Hey, Dad," he said, dropping his bag. "Need help prepping for tomorrow?" Michael picked up his grandfather's recipe book, opening it to a well-worn page. "Actually," he said, "I think it's time you learned the real family recipes in Armenian." As father and son stood side by side in the kitchen, the spirit of 3 generations of Carters filled the air. Outside, the city was changing. But in here, tradition lived on, not as a relic of the past, but as a living, breathing testament to the power of family, community, and a perfectly made pizza. And somewhere Michael knew his grandfather was smiling. That's the story, friends. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing it with you all. Don't forget to comment below and let me know where you're watching from. It's always fun to see the global reach of these stories. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories, tips, and tricks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. If you'd like to show some extra love, tap the 3 dots near the share button and send a super thanks.